Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The lake was calm, my coffee was hot, and then a white SUV with Property Watch rolled up like I'd just invaded Normandy. I owned the land, but that didn't stop them from trying to take it. They brought lies, fake maps, and lawsuits. I brought truth, and I don't lose ground. I'd been on the porch barely 10 minutes when the world reminded me that peace never lasts long for people with waterfront property. The sun hung low over Lake Broadwood, a warm amber sheet shimmering across water that had been in my family since long before anyone in the nearby subdivision learned how to pronounce the word jurisdiction. I sat with a mug of hot coffee, black, strong, unforgiving, like the lake itself. The old cedar boards under my feet creaked the same way they did when my grandfather sat here 50 years ago. Everything felt exactly right, which naturally meant something awful had to happen. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw the vehicle. Not a friendly pickup, not a neighbor out for a stroll. No, a white SUV plastered with a giant metallic blue decal that read Property Watch, Broadwood Vista Joe. It rolled to a stop like it was pulling into a crime scene. I hadn't even done anything yet, which is probably the part that offended me the most. Two people stepped out. First was a woman who looked engineered for confrontation, early 50s, athletic in the tense, wiry way of someone who stalks Facebook community groups for sport. Blonde bob frozen solid with enough hairspray to withstand a hurricane. Behind her lumbered a security guy, uniformed, bored, and already regretting his career choices. She marched up my porch steps without waiting for an invitation. "Good morning," she announced, the way a dentist announces you might feel a pinch before ripping something out of your skull. "I'm Karen Woolbridge, president of the Broadwood Vista Homeowners Association." I nodded slowly. "Congratulations." Her eyes narrowed. "This structure," she waved her tablet at my grandfather's cabin as though casting a spell, "is situated on community property, controlled by our HOA. You are occupying it illegally." I took a sip of coffee. "That's interesting. I own this cabin, and all the land between the cabin and that water behind me." She practically snorted. "Impossible. Our shoreline is common land. It's been that way since the development was created." "Your development was created in the early 2000s, I said. "My grandfather bought this land in the late 1960s, cash, directly from the county." "I have the documents." I stood, walked inside, and returned with a neat folder. The deed, the handwritten bill of sale from the county, a yellowed survey map stamped by the city planner half a century ago. I handed them to her. She didn't even look. She glanced at the first page for half a second, then tapped her tablet. "Our records say otherwise. This is listed as an abandoned temporary structure on community land. If you don't vacate by the end of the day, the HOA will take appropriate action." End of the day. I raised an eyebrow. "You work fast." "We maintain high standards," she replied. Her security guy nodded, as if he'd been trained to agree with the nearest alpha. I leaned on the porch railing. "You're standing on private property, ma'am. If you want to take this somewhere, I'm happy to call the sheriff and let him explain it to you." She stiffened, like a dog hearing thunder. "I'll bring law enforcement myself." She stormed off with the dignity of someone who expects background music when she leaves a room. I figured that was that. I should have known better. 20-some minutes later, gravel crunched again. This time, it was a black and white patrol SUV. Karen rode in the passenger seat, triumphant, like she'd brought reinforcements to a land invasion. The officer stepped out, adjusting his belt, scanning the place calmly. "Sir," he began, "we received a call about an unauthorized occupant on HOA property." I handed him the folder. "Here's my deed, survey map, parcel numbers, county registry code. If you want, I can pull the coordinates. I used to work with marine cartography. I know every inch of this shoreline better than anyone breathing." He flipped through the papers, actually reading them. His eyebrows rose. "These look valid. And old." He checked his onboard computer. "The county records match your documentation." Karen exploded. "No, they don't. That cabin is shown as a temporary structure. It's on our communal recreation land. He shouldn't be here." "He's trespassing." The officer closed the folder and handed it back to me. "Ma'am, everything I'm seeing says this is his property." Karen's voice rose an octave. "This is outrageous. Our HOA owns all shoreline rights in Broadwood Vista." I cleared my throat. "Your HOA doesn't extend down the slope. The boundary line is your fence. Everything from that fence down to the water belongs to me." The officer nodded slowly. Ma'am, I can't remove someone from their own property. Her face contorted. Rage, disbelief, maybe indigestion. Hard to tell. I will sue you, she hissed at him. Then she pointed at me. And you, this isn't over. You will be removed. If I have to go to the state, the county, or the damn governor, I will. You can't just sit here on land you don't own. Can, I said. Do. Will continue to. She practically vibrated with fury, then stormed back into the HOA SUV. They sped off, tires spitting dust and self-righteousness across my driveway. When the sound faded, the lake settled back into its soft morning quiet. I sat down, lifted my mug, and finished my coffee. It wasn't the peaceful morning I'd planned, but it did tell me one thing very clearly. Karen Woolbridge had just started a war she wasn't remotely prepared for. The next morning started with the kind of silence that felt staged, like the world had paused to take a breath before throwing something heavy at my head. The lake was calm, barely rippling, and the air had that fresh pine and water smell that usually meant I could relax. But the coffee in my mug hadn't cooled even a little by the time I heard the low, rhythmic thumping of machinery. It wasn't a boat. It wasn't a neighbor's lawnmower. It was something bigger, heavier, smugger. I walked down toward the shoreline and saw them. A work crew in neon vests unloading thick concrete forms and long steel piles from a flatbed truck parked on my land like they'd paid rent. A small excavator sat beside them, digging into the soil with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever finding a buried steak. The workers didn't look like the HOA type. They looked like guys who just wanted to finish the job fast and get paid. And behind them, planted proudly in the ground, was a brand new sign that read, "Coming soon, private lakefront pier for home members only." I stared at it for a long moment. My first thought was that it was too early in the day for a stroke. My second thought was that Karen had absolutely lost her mind. One of the workers noticed me. "Morning," he said, cheerful, like we were neighbors comparing tomato gardens. "We're pouring the footers before noon, so stay clear, all right?" "This is my land," I said evenly. "You're trespassing." He blinked, confused. "Ma'am said the HOA owns the shoreline. We got the contract signed and everything." I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "Ma'am lied to you. Pack it up." He shrugged and went back to his crew, clearly not paid enough to care about property disputes. I pulled out my phone, flipped on the camera, and filmed every detail: workers, equipment, the sign, the GPS coordinates blinking at the top of my screen. I documented the exact distance to my cabin, the angle of the shoreline, even the imprint of the excavator teeth in the soil. When the sheriff's dispatcher answered, I didn't bother with theatrics. Unauthorized construction on private land. Heavy equipment. Need a deputy. While waiting, I called my attorney, Martin Keller. He was a quiet, sharp-edged man in his early 50s, the type who could make a bulldozer apologize with the right citation of property law. He picked up on the second ring. "They're building a pier," I said, "right now, on my shoreline." There was a pause. "Concrete or wood?" "Concrete base with steel supports." He cursed very softly. "Shut everything down. Don't engage with the workers. I'll handle the legal side. And take pictures. Take enough to wallpaper your cabin." Already doing that. By the time the deputy arrived, tall, tired, and carrying the energy of someone who had seen too many HOA complaints for one lifetime, the workers had a good 8 feet of trench dug and were lowering rebar grids into place. He approached the foreman. "You aware this is private property?" he asked. The foreman pointed vaguely uphill. "The HOA president told us she had the rights." "She doesn't," I said, holding up my folder with the deed and maps. The deputy skimmed the papers, nodding. "This pier has to stop," he told the foreman. "Now, pack up your equipment and wait for clarification from your client." The foreman didn't argue. He turned off the excavator himself. That should have been the end of the morning, but I wasn't that lucky. Just as the workers started gathering their tools, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the County Environmental Office, the Environmental Great Lakes and Energy Division, or EGLE. The subject line froze me. Notice of pending investigation. Potential violation of shoreline environmental regulations. I opened it. Someone had submitted an anonymous report claiming my cabin was leaking wastewater into the lake and that I'd installed an unpermitted septic drainage system. According to the email, an inspection team was already en route. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because at this point the absurdity had hit critical mass. Karen didn't just want me gone. She wanted me legally scorched off the land like I was an invasive species. The deputy glanced at me. Bad news. Environmental complaint, I said. Apparently I'm single-handedly killing the lake. He snorted. You're about the fourth environmental complaint this HOA has pushed this year. You're just the first one not under their authority. Great. Pattern of abuse. Even better for Martin. About 20 minutes later, a white state SUV rolled up with two Eagle inspectors. One was a middle-aged man with a clipboard and a perpetual frown. The other, a younger woman with a calm expression that suggested she'd seen worse. I showed them the drainage system my grandfather installed half a century ago, the septic tank plan certified by the county, and my own updated maintenance records. They examined everything carefully. The older man kneeled, touched the soil, sniffed, probably prayed silently for patience. Everything here is compliant, he said at last. Better maintained than most of the lake houses, honestly. The younger inspector lowered her voice as we walked back toward the cabin. Can I give you a friendly tip? When environmental complaints come in this fast and this targeted, it usually means someone's trying to freeze your property until they can push through a land use amendment. HOA? I asked. She gave me a look that translated to, of course, HOA. Who else has this much free time and spite? The deputy left. The inspectors left. The construction crew left. The only thing that stayed was the sign, half crooked and mocking. I filmed it from every angle. Then I headed back to the cabin, made fresh coffee, and called Martin again. It's escalating, I said. He exhaled. Good. That means they're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Standing on the porch, I watched the abandoned trench and the silent equipment. The lake was calm again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. This was only the first shot, and Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I woke up the next day with the uneasy calm of someone who knows they're standing in the eye of a storm. The pier construction had been halted, the workers gone, the machinery dragged back up the slope, but the gouged trench they left behind still sat there like an open wound, a reminder that Karen wasn't the kind of person to accept reality. She was the kind of person who tried to replace reality with paperwork. And right on cue, around 11 in the morning, Martin called me. I've got something, he said. You might want to sit down. I didn't. Bad news tastes better standing. I requested the parcel documents from the county registry, he continued. They sent me everything they have on file, including a revised shoreline usage map submitted last year. Revised? I repeated. Yes. According to this update, your cabin isn't listed as an independent structure at all. In fact, the entire shoreline is marked as a contiguous stretch of community recreation land maintained by the Broadwood Vista HOA. I let the silence hang, just to make sure I heard it right. So, they drew my entire property out of existence. Essentially, yes. I exhaled through my teeth. Send it to me. The email came in seconds later. I opened the attachment and stared at what had to be the most brazen piece of bureaucratic fiction I'd ever seen. My cabin, gone. My shoreline merged into a single thick outline labeled HOA, Lake Access Zone. The map looked official at first glance, complete with a certification stamp, a digital signature, and the name of a civil engineer. Only problem? The engineer was someone whose license had been revoked roughly 5 years earlier for falsifying wetland surveys. I zoomed in on the certification stamp. The notary signature was smudged like someone had tried too hard to make it look stamped. The date didn't match the registry log, and the coordinates were off by a good 50 yards. Like someone dragged my land over using a mouse and called it a day. Jesus, I muttered. This is sloppy. Sloppy is good, Martin said. Sloppy gets people indicted. Before I could respond, another voice chimed in. Mr. Hanner, a man stood at the bottom of my stairs, lean, mid-30s, wearing business casual clothes and a badge clipped to his belt. I recognized the county seal. I'm Investigator Paul Bingham with the Office of Property and Land Use Compliance. I'm here regarding an internal review. Let me guess, I said. You're here because someone submitted a shoreline reassessment last year. He stopped mid-step. You're already aware. Just found out. Come on up. He joined me on the porch as I opened the map on my laptop. The man studied it for maybe 5 seconds before his forehead creased hard enough to fold steel. Oh, this is bad, he murmured. This is extremely bad. For me or them? I asked. Both probably, but mostly them. He pointed to the bottom of the page. This signature belongs to a civil engineer who hasn't been licensed for half a decade. And this stamp. That's not the current county design. Someone pulled an old template. So this wasn't filed legitimately. Not even close. He shook his head, genuinely baffled. Whoever submitted this knew just enough to fake a document, but not enough to do it right. Amateur work. Amateur or not, it was dangerous. I'll need to take an official copy for the investigation, he said. And I want you to send me everything you have. Your original deed, your grandfather's survey map, anything that predates the HOA. I can do that. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look, off the record, this reeks of someone trying to shift a property boundary without going through legal channels. And that's usually done because they know the legal channels won't give them what they want. Karen, I said flatly. He didn't confirm, but his silence did it for him. After he left, I went inside to scan the rest of my documents. That's when my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Privately, I can help you. JP. Only one person came to mind. Jeremy Parks, one of the quieter members of the HOA board. I'd seen him at a distance during the pier fiasco. Tall, bookish, uncomfortable, like someone who joined the HOA expecting free coffee and wound up in a cult. I replied, name the place. He chose the most suspicious spot imaginable, the old public picnic area on the North Trail, long abandoned after a storm took out the roof decades ago. Perfect place for a secret meeting. Or a murder. 50-50, really. I hiked there an hour later. Jeremy was already waiting, pacing like he was being hunted by ghosts. Thanks for coming, he said, voice low. I can't be seen talking to you. Not with everything happening. I'm listening. He rubbed his hands together. The map. You're not mistaken. Karen pushed it through. She hired that ex-engineer herself, paid him under the table. She told the board it was just a technical adjustment to make the shoreline uniform. And no one questioned her? Oh, people questioned her, he said, eyes darting. She discouraged dissent, publicly humiliated a board member last fall. Another resigned. No one wants to cross her. She weaponizes bylaws. Sounded exactly like her. I don't like what she's doing, Jeremy continued, and I want her gone. I want to call an emergency vote to strip her presidency. But I can't do that unless I know exactly what she falsified. And you. He looked at me meaningfully. You have the documents she's afraid of. Why help me? I asked. He swallowed. Because if she brings this pier project to completion, we're all liable, civilly, financially, possibly criminally. And when the fallout comes, and it will, I refuse to be standing near her. Smart man. I gave him a small nod. I'll send you copies of everything. He nodded back, relief breaking through his panic. Thank you, and be careful. She's cornered, and people like her get dangerous when cornered. He left as quickly as he'd come. On the way back to my cabin, the wind shifted. Clouds rolled in over the lake, heavy and gray. The water darkened, choppy, restless. It felt like the lake itself knew something big had just been set in motion. I didn't know it yet, but that forged map, that stupid, poorly faked piece of paper, was the beginning of the end. For Karen, for the HOA's entire power structure, and for whatever illusion of control they thought they had over me. And I had only just started fighting back. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles in when you know your enemy has made the first illegal move, but still thinks they're winning. It's like watching a chess opponent gloat after taking your pawn, unaware you've set a trap 3 moves deep. That's exactly where we were. Karen had filed a fake map, hired an unlicensed engineer, and started building on my land. Now all I had to do was let her keep walking into the quicksand. That morning, I emailed the original deed, survey documents, and photographs of the construction site to both Martin and Jeremy Parks. Martin responded immediately with a thumbs-up emoji, followed by a detailed legal strategy. Jeremy's reply was just 2 words: "This is war." He wasn't wrong. Karen didn't waste time retaliating. That afternoon, a slick video dropped on the HOA's community portal, and by evening, it was airing on the local channel WMLT-7. The headline ran across the bottom of the screen in big white letters. Veteran occupies HOA property, blocks public lake access. They used a zoomed-in, unflattering picture of me, arms crossed on the porch like I was preparing for a siege. The piece was slickly edited, shots of Karen walking along the lake with dramatic music playing underneath, her voiceover dripping with feigned concern. "No, we're just trying to preserve this space for the community," she said, holding back a tear so well you'd think she practiced in the mirror. It's heartbreaking that someone would exploit a clerical loophole and claim exclusive rights to land that's always been shared. Shared. The only thing Karen ever shared was blame, and only when cornered. The news segment interviewed a few of her lapdog neighbors too, folks I'd never even spoken to, who parroted the same lines about entitlement and preserving the community spirit. They painted me as some lone squatter trying to cut people off from their birthright. I was impressed, honestly. The editing was clean, the messaging tight, and the manipulation damn near professional, but Karen had made a fatal mistake. She took it public too early. Within an hour, my phone blew up. Old Navy buddies, high school friends, even my ex-girlfriend's dad messaged me. "Is this real? Need backup." You want me to find her LinkedIn? But buried among the support was a real threat. Angry locals posting about storming the cabin. Threats to take back the lake. And at least one guy claiming he'd hook his boat and drag that squatter's house into the water. So I responded the way any rational adult would. I called a drone guy. His name was Calvin, local freelancer, 20-something, wore aviators even when it rained. For $200, he set up a 360-degree perimeter surveillance system, including a motion-activated trail cam pointed toward the HOA's upper path, just in case someone got creative with their property lines again. We mounted 2 of the cameras high in the trees, far enough back they couldn't be spotted unless someone had binoculars. And if Karen started peering into my forest with binoculars, well, that'd be a whole new lawsuit. By the next morning, Calvin's footage paid off. Karen had visitors, 2 HOA board members, one of them her longtime lapdog Marla, the other a portly man I didn't recognize, walked with her along the boundary fence. They stopped multiple times to point toward my property. At one point, Karen gestured with a clipboard like a commander reviewing troop placements. Later that day, Jeremy sent me a message. They're pushing for an emergency vote next week to ratify the shoreline as shared amenity space. She's claiming legal gray zone status while the investigation's pending. Gray zone. My ass. She was trying to bulldoze public perception while the law caught up, so I gave the public something else to look at. That night, I uploaded my own footage, raw, unedited, to a Reddit thread titled HOA President Illegally Builds on My Land, then Fakes the Map to Steal It. I included scanned copies of the original deed, the survey, time-stamped GPS logs from my phone, and high-resolution drone footage of the concrete being poured. Within 12 hours, it hit the front page. People love underdog stories, especially when the villain's name is literally Karen. The best part? Someone from WMLT7 reached out to me. A reporter named Talia Cortez requested an interview, saying they wanted to revisit the situation in light of new evidence. "Damn right you do," I said. We filmed the next day. I gave her the whole story, clean, factual, no fluff. I even walked her down to the trench and showed her where the pier construction had begun. She was sharp, skeptical, and absolutely loved the part where I pulled out my grandfather's original hand-sketched boundary map from a waterproof tube stored under the floorboards. 2 nights later, her segment aired, Lakefront Lies, how an HOA president tried to erase a property owner with a fake map. They played Karen's original interview side by side with my drone footage, freeze-framing on her saying the land was always shared, while the map showed a clear private parcel predating the HOA by over 30 years. It was brutal and perfect. Meanwhile, Jeremy sent another update. 3 board members are wavering. I think I can call for a no confidence vote next session. We'll need a majority. I told him I had something else to help tip the scales. Then I walked into my kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the one thing Karen forgot existed, my grandfather's recorded audio journal. He had taped hundreds of hours of rambling thoughts and stories over the years, most of them about fishing, local gossip, and how city people were ruining everything. But one entry in particular stood out, him explaining in plain words how and why he bought the shoreline in 1969 from a broke city council that didn't think lakefront land would ever matter. I copied that file to a flash drive. Karen declared war with fake maps and PR stunts. I was going to end it with a dead man's voice and the truth. I arrived at the town hall 15 minutes early and still felt late. The building looked like it hadn't been updated since Nixon resigned. Faded brick, squeaky flagpole, vending machine that only sold generic grape soda, but inside that dusty municipal chamber, the real battle was about to begin. The HOA was holding an emergency board session. Officially, it was to discuss concerns about recent media misrepresentation and reevaluate community resource designations. Unofficially, it was about me, about Karen. About a fraud so dumb and brazen it might just take down the queen of lakeside control freaks. Karen was already there, of course, flanked by her usual suspects. Marla the sycophant had a 3-inch binder labeled Supporting Documents, which probably contained 1,000 pages of nothing. A few other board members sat nervously along the front table, exchanging glances like nervous jurors forced to share a lunch tray with the defendant. And then there was Jeremy Parks, standing quietly in the corner, arms crossed, eyes calm. He nodded when he saw me, but didn't speak. Not yet. The moment the meeting opened, Karen launched into a monologue that made even Marla flinch. The time has come for unity, she said, like a cult leader trying to rally the flock before the IRS kicks in the door. Certain outside parties have sought to mischaracterize our efforts to preserve shared space. I want to reaffirm that everything we've done has been with transparency and legality. A murmur rolled through the crowd. I am submitting for record, she continued, a statement of reaffirmation for shoreline designation, itemizing community use of the lake access zones. Jeremy raised his hand. Point of order. Karen froze. This isn't a formal vote yet. Jeremy didn't blink. Then I move that it becomes one, effective immediately. One of the board members, a soft-spoken guy named Dean who always looked like he'd rather be golfing, seconded the motion. Just like that, the room shifted. Karen realized what was happening a full 5 seconds too late. She tried to speak, but Jeremy cut her off. I'd like to motion for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president, on the grounds of falsification of property documents, misuse of community funds for unauthorized construction, and reputational harm to the association. Gasps. Not dramatic sitcom gasps. Real ones from people who genuinely didn't think anyone would ever challenge Queen Karen. Karen laughed, but it didn't land right. This is ridiculous. You're letting him manipulate you? She jabbed a finger toward me like I was the devil's intern. I stayed quiet. Let her unravel. Jeremy didn't flinch. We've seen the original deed. The county investigator confirmed the shoreline was never HOA land. The so-called map update was submitted using an unlicensed engineer and an outdated registry form, and the pier was built on private property. Another board member, a woman named Paula, who'd previously voted with Karen on almost everything, stood up and said, I want her out. I didn't sign up for this mess. Karen looked around the room and saw it happen in real time. The mutiny, the shift. Her power evaporated like cheap perfume in the sun. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Jeremy beat her to it. I also have something for the record. He nodded toward me. I stood up, pulled out a small speaker, and pressed play. My grandfather's voice crackled through the room, rich and slow and full of old Michigan vowels. Back in '69, City was desperate. Nobody gave a damn about lakefront. They sold me that whole strip. Trees, rocks, water line, and all, for less than the price of a truck. My boys will keep it in the family. No HOA is going to touch it, not unless they rewrite the damn Constitution. Dead silence. Then the room exploded. Not with noise, just energy. You could feel it. People whispering, board members trading looks, Marla visibly panicking. Karen turned red. She actually said the words, "That's not admissible," as if anyone had asked for a courtroom ruling in a HOA board meeting. The vote was called. 6-1. Karen was stripped of her presidency on the spot. She stood motionless as if her entire nervous system had gone offline. You'll regret this, she muttered. I built this community. I kept it clean. No, Jeremy said. You controlled it. That's not the same thing. She stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots. But that wasn't the end of it. An hour later, Martin called. We got the formal findings back from the county review. Let me guess, I said. Multiple violations. Try criminal. The county investigator filed a report recommending charges for filing fraudulent land use documents, knowingly misrepresenting property boundaries for gain, and misuse of HOA funds without a board vote. But wait, I said. There's more, isn't there? Martin chuckled. Oh, buddy. She used association funds to pay the engineer under the table. That's embezzlement. And it gets better. The construction company she hired, turns out her nephew owns it. That's fraud, conflict of interest, and conspiracy. I whistled low. When does it go to the DA? It's already there. I went out on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, the lake calm again, like it always was after something violent passed through. The pier construction site was empty. The half-finished platform still jutted out over the water like the carcass of a dead lie. Inside, I opened the flash drive with the rest of my grandfather's recordings. He had dozens of them, maybe hundreds. I hadn't listened to most, but I figured I'd keep them around, because if there was one thing this war had taught me, it was that people like Karen don't just vanish after a vote. They regroup, and next time, they bring lawyers. The court date came faster than I expected. Maybe because Martin moved fast. Maybe because the county prosecutor smelled blood in the water. Or maybe because someone, somewhere, finally realized this wasn't just a property dispute. It was a full-blown case of organized fraud wrapped in suburban pretension. We stood outside the county courthouse in Jackson, Michigan, on a gray Tuesday morning. The building looked like a giant slab of wet concrete, all sharp lines and ugly windows, the kind of place that had never once heard laughter. Martin was beside me in a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut steel. Calm, confident, the kind of man who brought paperwork to a gunfight and still walked away with the deed. Karen showed up fashionably late, wearing sunglasses like she thought paparazzi might care. She had a new lawyer, slick, young, and visibly uncomfortable the moment he realized cameras were here. Local press had gathered outside, thanks to Talia Cortez's explosive follow-up piece, which now had over 200,000 views and counting. The headline was brutal. HOA fraud scheme uncovered. President accused of stealing lakefront property from veteran. Inside the courtroom, things moved quickly. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a silver bun and the permanent look of someone unimpressed with nonsense, called the case. Martin opened by laying out the timeline, simple and surgical. Original deed from 1969. Survey map confirmed by state-certified geodetic office. Construction of pier on private land. Filing of a fraudulent parcel map signed by a deregistered engineer. Misuse of HOA funds without member vote. Attempted cover-up using fabricated environmental complaints. Then he handed the judge a flash drive. And this, he said, is a digital copy of the recorded confession by Karen Woolbridge's nephew, owner of the construction company hired for the pier, stating he was promised immunity from code enforcement if he expedited the project. Karen's lawyer immediately objected. Your Honor, we haven't had time to authenticate this recording. You had time, the judge said without even looking up. Sit down. Karen squirmed in her seat, like she'd just realized the courtroom wasn't big enough to run from the truth. But the highlight, the real moment of beautiful devastation, came when the prosecution brought in a surprise witness, the county's senior archivist, a wiry man with the posture of a library shelf and the memory of a data server. He took the stand and calmly explained how the parcel had never once, in any official record, been classified as community land. Have you ever received a request by Broadwood Vista HOA to reclassify or merge that shoreline into a common-use tract? The prosecutor asked. Never, the archivist said. And if they had submitted one, it would have been rejected outright. Why? Because the property in question is clearly delineated as private in the 1969 deed, and no legal annexation or reassignment has been filed or approved in over 50 years. Karen's lawyer tried one last desperate move, claiming she had acted in good faith based on bad legal advice. The judge leaned forward. Good faith does not apply when you hire a deregistered engineer to fabricate maps and use HOA money without a vote to build on land you do not own. Then she turned to Karen directly. You did not make a mistake, Ms. Woolbridge. You orchestrated a scheme. You misled your community. You weaponized bureaucracy to erase another person's rights for your own gain. That is not a misunderstanding. That is criminal. Karen sat there, lips pressed so tight they looked stapled shut. The ruling came down swift and heavy. The pier and all unauthorized structures on my land had to be removed at the HOA's expense. A fine of $480,000 was levied against the HOA for unlawful land use, to be paid directly to me. Personal criminal charges filed against Karen. 3 counts of document fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy to defraud, 1 count of criminal trespass in furtherance of fraud, and 1 count of attempted unlawful transfer of title. Bail denied due to flight risk. Karen didn't even look at me as she was cuffed. She was escorted out the side door by deputies, the heels of her shoes clicking against the polished floor, no longer in control of anything. The room was silent. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters yelled questions. Jeremy stood by the courthouse steps, speaking to a small group of HOA members, some of whom looked angry, others just embarrassed. He caught my eye, nodded once. I didn't stick around for the press. I didn't need the attention. I got what I came for, vindication and my land back, with interest. Later that afternoon, I received notice from the county. Karen's house, partially built on land that had once technically bled into my parcel, was going up for auction. Martin called. Want to make an offer? I didn't hesitate. Buy it. Full price? No, lowball it. Make sure she sees the number. 3 days later, the house was mine for a fraction of its original value. Less than half what she'd poured into those granite countertops and smug, open-concept floor plans. I didn't even want the house. I just wanted her to know I had it. When I visited, I brought a little gift, a new sign. Private property. No trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Underneath, I added a brass plaque. Former home of Karen Woolbridge Est, 2008, terminated 2025. Then I walked back down to my cabin, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and sat on the porch, watching the lake shimmer under the late afternoon sun. The pier was gone. The lawsuit was over. But the war had been won. For the first time in weeks, the lake was silent in a way that felt earned, not tense. No construction noise, no HOA patrols, no shouting matches on the shoreline or engine growls from a trespassing pontoon boat. Just wind in the pines and the rhythmic lap of water against my dock. My dock now, not the HOA's imaginary lakefront amenity. The concrete scars of the pier had been jackhammered and hauled away within 72 hours of the court order, along with the sauna Karen had smuggled in next to it, and a strange, inexplicable yoga platform someone had apparently built during the early phase of their recreation plan. I supervised it all personally. Sat on a lawn chair with a clipboard like a pissed-off building inspector. Every chunk of unauthorized rebar that came out of the ground made me feel just a little taller. The cleanup wasn't just physical. It was political, social, psychological. Karen's fall had sent ripples through Broadwood Vista like a stone dropped into still water. At first, people pretended nothing had happened. Lawn care routines resumed, HOA newsletters went out on schedule, and Marla tried to act like she hadn't been second in command of a petty dictatorship. But then came the resignations. 3 board members quit in the same week. 2 more declined re-election. Jeremy was named interim president with near unanimous support, mostly because no one else wanted the job and everyone agreed he wasn't insane. He came by my cabin one evening, still wearing his HOA badge like it was radioactive. I'm dismantling the Property Watch program, he said, standing awkwardly next to my porch with a 6-pack of local IPA. Also getting rid of the golf cart patrols. Turns out we were paying $2,000 a month for Marla's nephew to drive in circles and take pictures of garden gnomes. Shocking, I said, accepting a beer. We sat for a while without talking, watching a heron fish near the shallows. I meant it, you know, he finally said. I wouldn't have had the guts to challenge her without you. You had the guts, I replied. You just needed a crisis to force your spine into place. He smiled. Well, you were one hell of a crisis. It wasn't just Jeremy who changed. I started noticing shifts in the neighborhood's tone. People who'd once avoided eye contact now waved. A few even stopped by to apologize. Not for siding with Karen exactly, but for not questioning her. One guy even brought me a blueberry pie with a note taped to the tin. Sorry I called you that crazy cabin guy. On Facebook. Nice porch. Even the local media had turned. Talia Cortez aired a follow-up special titled When HOA Power Goes Too Far, a veteran's stand against suburban tyranny. She interviewed other homeowners who'd been pushed out or bullied by similar associations. Apparently, my story had kicked off a minor investigative gold rush into small-town overreach. But my personal favorite ripple effect came 2 weeks later when I got a letter in the mail from a law office in Lansing. The envelope contained an official offer from a group of independent homeowners and small landowners across Michigan asking me to speak at an upcoming summit about property rights and HOA reform. They were calling it the Lakefront Doctrine. I laughed for a solid minute. I hadn't even meant to start a movement. I just wanted to drink coffee in peace and not get arrested on my own porch. I told them I'd think about it. By the end of that month, the HOA's bylaws were rewritten. Property access codes were permanently removed from my address in their system. The parcel line was updated in the county record with glowing language. Privately held since 1969. Non-HOA controlled. Deed validated. They might as well have written "Don't even think about it" in bold. One afternoon, as I stood on the dock with my fishing rod in hand, a small aluminum boat drifted into view. A man I didn't recognize slowed his engine and raised a hand sheepishly. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he called. "I used to fish off this shore with my dad back when it was all public. Any chance I could cast a line or two?" "I'll stay out of your way." I looked at him, then at the lake, then back. "You got bait." He held up a little cooler. "Worms and coffee." I nodded. "Then tie off. 2 rods max. Don't be loud." He grinned and coasted over. Simple as that. No fences, no forms, no HOA pass cards, just respect. Later that week, I had a dozen small signs printed and passed out to locals I trusted. They read, "Welcome to the waterfront, ask first. Fish smart, respect the shore." Below that, in smaller type, "Dock by permission, not by entitlement." CH. And just like that, the culture changed. Quietly, permanently. No board meetings, no votes. Just neighbors doing the one thing HOA manuals never teach you to do: treat each other like humans. Spring came early the next year, and with it, something rare and unfamiliar: peace. Not just quiet, not just a lack of shouting or subpoenas, but real, satisfying, birdsong and coffee on the porch peace. The lake thawed faster than usual. The last sheet of ice cracked down the middle one morning while I was refilling a bird feeder. I watched it split like the final page in a bad chapter, drifting away in silence. Poetic, I know, but you spend a year fending off suburban warfare and see if you don't get a little sentimental about frozen water. I just finished converting the old boathouse into a rustic clubhouse. Nothing fancy, just a few handmade benches, a potbelly stove, and a wall of fishing gear older than most HOA board members. I called it the Dock House. On weekends, I hosted a handful of locals I trusted: teachers, fishermen, retirees who knew what the lake looked like before the McMansions arrived. We grilled hot dogs, swapped stories, listened to old records. No drama. No minutes to approve. Just life, uninterrupted. I also did something I never thought I'd do. I joined a committee. Not the HOA, obviously. I'd rather tattoo their bylaws on my face than sit through one of their vision planning sessions. No, this was a grassroots property rights coalition, state level. People who'd read my story, heard my voice, and decided they were tired of being pushed around by golf cart warlords and fake architectural standards. I spoke at their first summit, told them about the map, the lies, the arrest. Told them how I won, not by yelling louder, but by documenting everything, outmaneuvering fraud with facts. They gave me a standing ovation and a plaque shaped like the state of Michigan. I used it as a paperweight. Karen, she's still in jail. Her sentencing made local headlines again. 12 years, no parole for the first 5. The court rejected her appeal, citing the deliberate and prolonged nature of the fraud, the damage to public trust, and the exploitation of community authority for personal gain. Her house, my house now, got stripped of everything HOA-ish. I tore out the security cameras, repainted the sterile beige walls, replaced the front gate with a wooden arch that said, "Private land, public decency." Then I let the place sit empty for 6 months, just to let the neighborhood get used to the idea that their former queen no longer ruled anything. Eventually, I turned it into a guest house for veterans passing through. Nothing flashy, just a clean bed, lake view, and hot coffee in the morning. They sign a logbook when they visit. Some leave stories. One guy left a sketch of Karen's face on a life preserver with the caption, "HOA, hold off, asshole." That one made me laugh for days. And still, every once in a while, someone from the HOA walks past the new fence line, peering through the trees like they can't believe it's all real. That the shoreline they once tried to fence off, pave over, and rezone now belongs to one man with a deed and a temper. Sometimes I wave. Sometimes I don't. Last week, I saw Marla again. She looked older, smaller. She tried to smile. I just nodded and kept walking. That's enough. Some people don't need closure. They just need to be irrelevant. And me? I spend my mornings exactly how I wanted when all this started, sitting on the porch, hot mug in hand, watching the water. On especially calm days, I swear I can still hear my grandfather's voice in the wind. Keep it in the family, son. No HOA's gonna touch it. They tried. They failed. And now, every spring, I hand out fresh bumper stickers to guests who stop by the dock house. They say, dock with permission, not with entitlement. Property rights, 1 Karen, 0. The lake belongs to no one. But this shoreline, that's mine. Forever.